Luke Jenner, thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Giles. Happy to be here.
Look, we've heard a lot about vehicle-to-grid technology over the last couple of years, and more recently with new standards being approved that would allow most EVs to connect to the grid and act as battery on the wheels. And Essential Energy has now completed a trial, which you say is quite a milestone. Tell us what you've done and why.
Yeah, so we've completed our trial of vehicle to grid, and what we're announcing today at the Smart Energy Conference is the ability for consumers to actually buy a product, the SIG Energy battery, which has an inbuilt DC charger in it, bi-directional charger, and they can connect that to an Oz EV Ford F-150 Lightning and actually have vehicle to grid available in their home right now. It's actually a thing. It's been something that's been talked about for years and years, and we wanted to actually bring it to our consumers from today. So
Yeah.
it's here.
Yeah. So vehicle to grid's been talked about for a while, but it's just been limited on this old protocol called CHAdeMO, which was really applied to two cars, which not really the Nissan Leaf and the Mitsubishi Outlander. Most modern EVs, or all modern EVs, use the CCS2 technology, and we had not developed the standards for that now, and we had to go through and tick it off with the networks. We had to tick it off with the car manufacturers. We had to tick it off with the grid regulators, and we had to see these new products which actually could deliver that facility. So I guess you've got tick on all four boxes, at least with one car manufacturer now.
Yep, absolutely. So we did do significant research using the old CHAdeMO technology primarily on the Nissan Leaf, and we've actually got a customer down near Goulburn who's using that in the wild, and he was our first customer. But as you said, CCS2 is the common standard now, so we wanted to develop that product. So that's why we worked with SIG Energy with their two-way bidirectional charger, and which is DC. And we worked with Oz EV because they're an Australian remanufacturer of a Ford F-150 Lightning.
Yeah.
So they've got access to all the codes and the software to make sure that it actually is compatible.
And how do you end up with a Ford 150 Lightning? Because
Yeah, so Essential Energy is the poles and wires business in rural, regional, and remote New South Wales. And as you can appreciate, we cover all sorts of terrain. And we've got a mission to electrify our fleet. And so the F-150 Lightning is a trial unit that we bought so we can test the capabilities of electric utes in the field, then understand what are their limitations and also what advantages do they bring to our workforce. So that's how we ended up with the F-150 Lightning.
And the F-150s, they're nice cars, but they're not very cheap, and there's not many of them. So, when do the owners of other sort of electric vehicles able to do the same sort of thing? Because everyone seems to be desperate to do it. I mean, most of the queries that we get now is like, "Oh, can we do vehicle to grid?"
And that's really the rub of what we've done. So we built an innovation lab in Port Macquarie where we're testing all this technology. So far, we've tested over 15 makes and models of vehicles with the SIG Energy unit, and all but two have been able to successfully work in a vehicle to grid configuration. What we need to do is spark the imagination of the EV manufacturers and get them on board so that there's not an inadvertent software change or something that
Okay.
disables the vehicle.
So you've done that testing sort of quietly behind the scenes, just sort of grabbed a car and just tested it just to see if the technology works.
So we
Happy with it.
our own vehicles, pool vehicle fleet. Employees have brought in their own vehicles and been keen to test to see whether it works. And so, as I said, we've done it with over 15 vehicles and had a very high success rate.
Okay. Any brands that you can mention, or?
Well, I mean, all the popular brands have been tested, and the common ones. So they're not talking like high end supercars or anything like that. These are cars that mum and dads would buy, that our employees are buying.
Yeah.
So all the common ones are working, but we really need the manufacturers to get on board.
Yeah, and what do you need them to do? Are you talking to them, or is that somebody else's business job
No,
to do
we
that?
are talking to them. We're talking to them directly, but as you can appreciate, Australia doesn't really have its own car industry. There's the remanufacturers like Oz EV, and so sometimes there's a kind of a layer that's hard to get through between the Australian distributor and the parent company overseas, and that's probably the layer we need to break through.
So what sort of timeline do you think by the end of the year might we see more car manufacturers doing this? I mean, yeah, because I mean, a lot of people are desperate. I mean, I actually I'm on your network in the north of the state in Byron Bay, and we had the little cyclone that came through and knocked down a whole bunch of trees. And you guys did a terrific job getting the power back on, and we were very happy. But I was without power for 12 hours. I was sitting there looking at my two Teslas in the driveway and thinking, well, that's bloody useless because they're not helping me out at all. But, will people up there be able to have any sort of EVs by the end of the year?
So
Or
I think we are working with one manufacturer in particular who's super keen, and that they're selling vehicles in the $50,000 price range. So, and I would be hopeful that by the end of the year we'll actually have that one working. So,
what a shame you can't tell us who it is. From Essential Energy's point of view, then, what do you want to see, and how do you imagine this sort of working? Because you've got a huge network. It's 95% of the state. You've got almost like 1 million customers. It's the poles and wires, because so these are the things that stretch over kilometres in the outback. I mean, it's a network that's actually quite subject to weather and things like that. I mean, what benefits will it have for the grid?
yeah, well, firstly, I think the thing we need to understand about vehicle to grid technology is it is going to help democratize energy, and it is going to help bring down prices for all consumers. We're always really focused on trying to keep downward pressure on electricity prices. Anything we can do to minimize the kind of investment we need to make in poles and wires is going to help every consumer. So this isn't just something to benefit those that can afford an electric vehicle or a home battery. But vehicle to grid technology, from our perspective, is an absolute game changer for distribution networks, because the amount of storage, you just mentioned it with your two Teslas sitting in your garage or on your property during Cyclone Alfred, the amount of storage that's actually already out there that we can't tap into is just phenomenal. And we all know that there's an excess of solar in the middle of the day. The pool price is negative. We've got 36% of our customers have solar on their roofs. The systems are getting bigger, and we're installing 15 to 20 our customers are installing 15 to 20 megawatts of new solar each and every month onto our network.
Well,
And we've got this expression in Essential Energy: distribution networks used to be a place where electrons went to be consumed or die. And now we want to make sure that we harness every electron. So if we can get vehicle to grid on our network, the amount of storage we've got will just explode. And that's going to help stabilize power prices. It's going to help people use their own energy for their own self-consumption purposes. It's going to help everybody in the whole ecosystem. So we are big believers in vehicle to grid.
and I was kind of interested at the start of that, you were sort of talking about sort of it lowers costs of the grid. So if you see an area with a whole bunch of electric vehicles that can do vehicle to grid technology, does that mean that you need a bigger grid or a reinforced grid, or is that actually going to alleviate the need to?
It'll actually alleviate it. So because our network, as you mentioned, is a big sparse network. We've got wires that go right across the state. And that means that our network is has relatively low utilization, because it's designed to go big distances. And so if we can put distribution storage around our network, that is going to really help smooth out the humps and hollows in network capacity, and mean that we don't have to invest as much in poles and wires. So we're rolling out pole top batteries at the moment. 35 pole top batteries are just installed. But the reality is, one of those pole top batteries is only the same capacity as a Tesla Model 3. So we can avoid all that expense in putting a pole top battery at the end of your street if 3 or 4 people in the street have got Teslas. We're 3 or 4 times ahead of where we would have otherwise have been. So, not everyone's going to be plugged in at the same time, but statistically, there'll be enough that'll make a big difference.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So that are you saying, well, there's 3 guys living in that street with Tesla Model 3s. We don't need to put a pole top battery in there. But what sort of commitment do you need? I mean, do you need any sort of commitment when you're thinking about this in terms of sort of grid planning and stuff like that? Or do you do just based on statistics? I mean, a car is parked for 95% of the time. Therefore, there's every chance it's going to be there at some
The whole electricity network is designed on statistics, right? So if you look at everyone in your street, if they all use the maximum amount of power, the transformer at the end of the street wouldn't have enough capacity. But forever and a day, we've always had this thing called power diversity, which acknowledges the fact that not everyone turns their oven on at the same time. Not everyone turns their washing machine on at the same time. And exactly the same thing will happen for electric vehicles. If you've got 1,000 electric vehicles in a community, so statistically, there'll be a number of them plugged in at any one time. You don't need, and CSIRO spoke about this, you don't need all of those vehicles plugged in to make a difference to the grid.
So you are quite confident then, Essential Energy, or this broad network, you cover all of regional New South Wales apart from the major low centres. Everyone goes out or nearly everyone goes out and gets an EV, and they want a vehicle to grid. Then you're happy with that, you're cool with that, and you actually think that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. And the way we're thinking about it, because we want this to be easy for our customers, is if you want to connect vehicle to grid to our network, it's just like installing a solar inverter with a battery behind it, but the battery happens to be sitting on 4 rubber tires. So So we're taking a very open-minded view to vehicle to grid. We want it on our network.
This is such a change from the way that you would have done business, say, 10 to 15 years ago, where, as you said, network was a place where some electrons go to die. And
Absolutely.
and now you'll be kept alive. You're circulating around, bouncing around, and all being used.
And I've been around in essential energy long enough to remember the 60-cent feed-in tariff, and there were engineers running around like this is going to be a bad thing for the network. And we've turned that on its head. And we see solar and battery is absolutely a great thing for the network and a great thing for consumers.
And there's an interesting question though, how have you actually turned that on the head? Is that because you've understood a bit more about the engineering, what's possible within your own grid limits and things like that, or the engineers came from a different time and a different way of thinking about the grid? Because that's what we've seen that a lot in the last 10 years. People thought what was once impossible on the grid is now very possible.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a journey, and it's about taking everyone in the organization on that journey. And we speak about it a lot in our organization about the really critical role we play in the energy transition at Essential Energy. We believe the distribution network is a really key part of that. And it's about showing people the possibilities of what renewable energy can do to benefit everybody.
And we did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Mark England, the chief executive of Ausgrid, and he was talking about, again, this sort of untapped capacity on sort of all these distributed grids, and mentioned that you guys, I think we're all working together to do your own sort of ISP, your integrated system plan for distributed network.
Correct.
Just to tell the market operator or the other policymakers, hey guys, look at us. These you guys have got problems with transmission lines and the cost of building new poles and wires. Well, we've got existing poles and wires. There's so much capacity, and I guess that applies just as much for vehicles as it does for new wind, solar, and battery projects.
Correct. And Essential Energy's got a very big, thousands of kilometres of 132 kV network that spans long distances. A couple of years ago, we connected the 150 megawatt Flyers Creek wind farm directly into our 132 kV network, and it goes a couple of kilometres and connects directly to our largest customer, which is Cadia Gold. So it's a marriage made in heaven. So that's exactly what renewable energy should be. And if we can generate, store, and use energy locally, that is a great outcome for the energy transition as a whole.
Fantastic. Well, Luke Jenner, thank you very much for joining the podcast, and all the best. And I hope, I hope I can turn my EV into a battery on wheels sometime soon.
Thanks, Giles. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.